Hi, my name is Anna DePaulo, and I'm here with my grandmother, Dorothy DePaulo, and this is my dad's mother. Okay, let's start off. Where did our family come from, and how do you know?
Okay, my mother's family came from Canada, and before that, some of her relatives were from Ireland. And my father's family came from Lithuania. And how I know that is because, first of all, I was told that, and then also I have here the census from 1910 and 1920, and it tells where they were born.
Now, was your father born in Lithuania, or?
No, he was born in the United States. His oldest brother was born in Lithuania, and all the rest were of his brothers. He was one of one of seven, I'm sorry. His brothers were, and sister, they were all born in the United States.
How many generations can you trace back from your parents?
Probably I can go back to my great-grandmother. And then in my father's family, just back to his his parents, my grandparents.
And can you recall any names, places of birth, or birthdays?
I don't know what their birthdays were, but I don't have that information. I only have the information that my grandmother, Anna, was her name, Anna Kundrit. She was born in 1901, and my grandfather, Constantine, was born in 1898.
Okay. So, do we have any veterans in our family?
Yes, my Uncle Morris, he was in World War II, and my Uncle Bill was in the Korean War, and my Uncle Leo, here's the picture of Uncle Leo, he never left Canada. He lived there, the whole time, and he was in some sort of army, whatever, in Canada. And that's the means of transportation.
And this was
And that was taken
1929?
1929.
That's a really cool picture. Okay. Can you tell me any stories about our family?
Yes, I have a couple stories. I have a story my mother told me about the Great Fire in the Upper Peninsula in Michigan. And my great-grandmother and great-grandfather lived in a cabin in the woods in the Upper Peninsula. And a fire started, and they called it the Great Fire because it burned, and so many people it burned lots of areas, and so many people died. And I'm kind of curious now. I think what I'm going to do sometime this week is go and look on the computer and see if I can pull that information up.
And learn about the fire.
And learn about the fire.
See what happened, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But so what happened was that the fire started, and again, they didn't have anything like we have nowadays, and they were just living in the woods in a cabin. No telephone, no car, no nothing.
And this was your grandma and her parents, right?
So this is my great-grandparents.
Okay, and their kids.
And their kids.
So be your, grandma.
Right,
okay.
Right. So the fire started, and so my great-grandfather took my grandmother, and she was probably one or two, and his wife, my great-grandmother, took the other kid, and they started running, and she was, well, first of all, you couldn't see anything because for all the smoke.
Yeah.
And they started running, but she was so nervous, she ran the wrong way. She ran into the fire, and so it is awful. So they died, and my grandfather held my great-grandfather held my grandmother. Elizabeth was her name, and they got out of the fire. Her back was burned, with all the stuff that was going on, but at least she was okay.
Did you ever meet your grandmother?
Yes.
Like you met, yeah, you knew her.
Oh yeah, I knew my grandmother. Her name was Elizabeth, and so again at that time, my great grandfather couldn't take care of Elizabeth because he had to rebuild the house, and he couldn't take care of a little kid, so he took her back from Michigan, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, back to her home in Canada, and it was around Stratford, Ontario. And so he took her back so that Elizabeth's family could raise her. And my mother always said that my grandmother was a spoiled person because her aunts doted on her and gave her anything she wanted. And then I think she was around 16 or so, and her dad came and said, okay, I want you to come back and live with me in Michigan. I'm married and have children and whatever. And the aunts wouldn't let her go. They said, no, you just want her to go and cook and clean and take care of the kids. And she's not leaving. They wouldn't let her go.
Yeah, and he didn't even know her whole life.
And they didn't know each other at that point. So she stayed with, her aunts. And then another time, my mother was telling me that when my grandmother was married and had kids, my mother happened to be one of the kids. She was the oldest. And they saw this stranger walking down the road. And so when he came to the house, he said, that he was my grandmother's father. And so they met. Probably that was the last time they saw each other.
Any other stories?
Oh, yes, I do have another story. I have a story about, let me see, what's it going to be about? My mother, she was the oldest of 8 kids. And she always told me that her dad, who she loved very much, was a farmer, but he wasn't a good farmer. Had 8 kids, wasn't a good farmer. So my mother had to go to work, and she was about 16, and they sent her from Canada to the big city of Detroit, Michigan, and she worked for this rich family, and she had to send the money back home so that her
help her family.
brother, help her family. So she did that, and that's kind of where, eventually where my mother met my dad. She was working at this big fancy home, and my dad was a security guard, and he'd go and check the doors of the homes, whatever, and they met, and they fell in love, and so they got married. She was around 33 when they got married, and he was 7 years younger. And at that time, because that probably was about 1932, she was considered an old maid. I mean, they did label people
33.
at 32, 33. Yes, an old maid. As a matter of fact, I have their picture here too. I probably should have brought it out, but here we go. Well, this is the wedding picture. So that's my mom and my dad, and then my Aunt Joanne and my Uncle Father Mike, his name was. They all look so happy. People didn't smile for pictures
I know,
in
because
those
it didn't
days.
take so long to take
Yeah.
them, so they had to it would be hard to smile that long.
Yeah. So that was that. So anyway, and then I do have another story. When we lived in Saudi Arabia, my daughter Angela, she was about in the 3rd grade, your aunt, Angela, and so she came home from school one day, and she said, Mom, I want to play a musical instrument. And so I said, okay, good. What do you want to play? She said, I don't know. So I said, think about it. And then probably about a week later, she said, I know what I want to play. And I said, what do you want to play? She said, the violin. And I was kind of shocked. And I said, the violin? I said, why did you pick the violin? And she said, I like the sound.
Oh.
She would listen to, on the radio, whatever. Now, living in Saudi Arabia, you just couldn't, there was no music store. I mean, it was crazy life over there. And so we went on vacation in the winter. I think we went to Switzerland. And we bought her a guitar, I'm sorry. We bought her a violin.
So I want to violin. You're like, nope, we're doing the guitar.
We're doing the guitar. And then we found somebody who knew somebody who would give lessons. And so she started taking lessons. And anyway, then when we came back to the States, we found somebody who gave lessons. He was a first chair violinist in the symphony orchestra in Miami. And he would give lessons in his house. And so you have to go and kind of interview with him. And Angela went, and he was very hard on her, when she interviewed, but he said he'd take her as a student. So then he said, every time I'd go and pick her up, he'd say, "Who plays the violin in your family? She has it in her blood." And I said, "You mean she has music in her blood?" And he said, "No, she has a violin in her blood." And he had asked me periodically over the years. And one day I said to my mother, I said, "Mom," "this Mr. Perlucci," was his name, "Mr. Perlucci keeps telling me Angela has it in her blood, that, somebody played the violin in the family." And my mother said, "Yeah, somebody did. It was my great-grandfather."
Oh.
No, my grandfather. Okay, I'm sorry. My grandfather, her dad. And she said that he used to play the fiddle, which is the same thing as a violin.
Yeah.
And he would even put it, and she stood up, even put it behind his back and play it behind his back.
So he definitely had it in his blood.
And that people came from miles around to hear him play.
Oh, wow.
But then during World War II, he had a stroke, and he couldn't play anymore. And so they sold the violin to somebody in Canada. And my mother said, "I know, I still talk to that lady. I'm going to ask her what happened to the violin." So my mother asked this lady, she called her up, said, "Hey, whatever happened to the violin?" And the lady said, "Oh, it's in the basement." Her husband used to play, but then he died. She stuck it in the basement. And so she said, "You can have it." She gave it to my mother, and my mother gave it to Angela.
Aww.
And Angela still has a violin.
Does she still play it?
Yes.
That's so cute.
It's a strange thing,
Oh, okay. So, do we have any genealogical records? And if so, where are they?
Okay. First of all, my cousin Diane contacted me a couple years ago, putting together genealogy from the Kundrat side, my dad's side of the family, because she was my cousin from my dad's side. And then also she was putting together the genealogy of her husband. And I sent her a lot of information. I haven't been able to find it, but I can contact her, because I think she put it in the form of a book.
Mm-hmm.
So I can contact her and see how I can get it. I probably would have to buy it, I'm sure. That's how these places work.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.